Hello, everyone, and welcome to this other series of questions where I give my take on some questions that I consider seriously interesting. As I said on my first video, where I answer some questions, these are just my opinions and how I negotiate my own way around these interesting questions and intellectual and social challenges. I'm giving my take on these questions, not because I think I have any kind of special insight, but maybe some of the things that I say may resonate with you and promote further thinking, whether you agree with me or not. So the first question that I'm going to be looking at today is, why can't more Muslims adopt liberal interpretations or take more liberal positions on issues such as LGBT? People make fun of me because I get the T and B wrong sometimes. I do apologize. No offense to any individuals, but LGBT issues and issues such as having female imams, for example. So here's the thing, even before talking about things like jurisprudence or scholarship, which I'm not really going to here actually, partly because I'm far from an expert. Here's a problem. Here is a fundamental issue that I have with liberal spokespeople, if you like, and liberal Muslim activists. Why are they doing what they're doing? What is their goal? I mean, here's mine. I want to go to paradise. And I want to take my family with me. And I want to see as much of humanity there as possible. Do I always behave consistently within that paradigm? Well, no, I don't. But at least it informs the way that I behave. But it really does seem with liberal spokespeople, like liberal Muslim activists, for example, who will give talks on TED Talks, for example, saying how all of these alternative sexualities are great and actually Islam has no problem with them at all. You know, it's all good, for example. It seems that their main goal is to promote liberalism. Like, I mean, for example, how often, and that sounds really obvious now that I say that, but how often do you see, let's say, a scholar or a student of knowledge who holds and discusses lots and lots of views on various things, is a known kind of, you know, scholar or student of knowledge, but then just happens to also think that, let's say, same gender intercourse is permissible, right? How often does that really happen? That you have somebody who is, broadly speaking, considered to be, fairly orthodox, a part of a community or community of scholars or students, and then just so happens to hold one of these liberal positions. That doesn't really seem to be the case. It seems to be with these liberal spokespeople and activists, that kind of seems to be their only thing. That they don't really seem interested in the rest of Islam, really. And so that's my first issue. The second difficulty is that actually adopting these positions, let's say adopting a position where you say, yes, I believe all these alternative sexualities, for example, it's fine, it's fine. Islam's okay with that. Amongst other things, it's not actually like this endears liberals towards Islam. They aren't telling you to adopt these ideas because if you do that, they'll come and adopt Islam. No, they are just trying to water down what you believe, right? I could understand this a little bit more if it were the case that there were loads of liberals who were saying, look, I would just love to be Muslim. I'd love to convert to Islam. But there's this liberal issue that I wish Islam was more liberal on this. And if it was, then I would become Muslim. But that isn't really what we see actually happening. Again, they're really just trying to water down the faith into unimportance. as they did with Christianity. And we can take this as a blueprint, as a lesson for what happens when you do try to water down aspects of your beliefs, because many Christians have compromised the tenets of their faith, thinking that it would become somehow more appealing to secular liberals, lapsed Catholics and so on, whatever that actually means. But actually, the opposite is true. Now they actually will hold you in contempt for compromising your beliefs, or at least your faith in contempt. And they still aren't satisfied, right? They still aren't satisfied, not until even with Christianity, watered down as it is, nor will they be until the very embers of Christianity in Europe have been completely extinguished. And I will actually say something on the subject of female imams, by the way, especially because the British media, particularly the BBC, has kind of recently had this kind of fetish for female imams. It's really weird, though, I think, like people who have a different faith or none at all telling you how to practice yours. Like it's I don't know, from a Muslim point of view, it's kind of weird, really. But anyway, a bit creepy, actually. But here's the thing. An imam is just somebody who leads a prayer. It's not the same debate as you had with, let's say, female priests, because being an imam in itself is not really associated with power or position, that the ladies are missing out on, right? You're just somebody leading a prayer, and you're no better than the people who you are leading. And the reason, or at least one reason anyway, why there haven't really been female imams is actually just a matter of impropriety, right? Just, bending down and so forth in front of men, because unpolitically correct as it may be to say, women are more beautiful creatures than men. On the whole, women tend to be more beautiful creatures than men, with more prominent features, anatomical features associated with reproduction, such as breasts, hips, and so forth. So it's nothing to do with them being less than men or less capable than men. So anyway, we should not submit to liberalism. We have already seen what has happened to our Christian friends when they have done so. And I mean, yes, by all means, yes, we should subject our interpretations of our faith to scrutiny. I believe in this age of confusion and questions, we should give credence to compassionate and even lenient interpretations if people want to follow them, but not ones that are simply within the parameters of secular liberalism. I mean, there are many things in this world that I'm uncertain about, but I'm pretty sure of this. Liberals are not going to come to Islam if we water it down and just turn it into another flavor of, forgive the crude phrase, liberalism for brown people. So the next question asks, why are Muslims so sensitive? Right? Why can't Muslims take a joke? So I think there are two parts to the way that I approach this question. So the first part is this. I would actually admit that yes, there is a subculture of insecurity and sensitivity in Muslim communities, both in the West and the Muslim world. I'm not going to deny that. And there are lots of reasons for this. Many Muslim communities in the West originate from rather insular communities, in many cases where one's honor is sometimes as important or sometimes even more so than life itself. And then you also have the kind of general feeling of the humiliation of colonialism, past and present, and all of those historical scars. But the reason why Muslims are, quote unquote, so sensitive, and of course here we are referring to sensitivity in the face of insults, directly and indirectly, I guess, about or directed at our faith. But there is more to it, I think. There is definitely more to it, I know. And I don't think Muslims are as uniquely sensitive as many people assume. Here's the thing, people get offended if what they hold sacred gets defamed. And almost everybody holds some things sacred. It's just that a lot of people cannot relate to the things that Muslims necessarily hold sacred because they don't hold them sacred, but they hold other things sacred. So I have accidentally, promise it was accidental, I have accidentally triggered feminists and other social justice warriors just by saying things as innocuous as women are generally better at caring for infants than men. And it's not even an insult. I guess it's a compliment. But they'll say, oh, it's demeaning, it's patronizing. And then sometimes, without seeing any irony whatsoever, they'll find an arbitrary aspect of life that they insist women do better than men. And then they'll say things like, oh, the world would be much better and much peaceful if women ran it, or virtually all relationship abuse comes from men. And you can't object to any of that. You cannot object to any of that. Otherwise, they will become seriously irate. And okay, maybe that is too easy a target. But being sensitive is certainly not just confined to Muslims and feminists and other social justice warriors. Here's another example. Right, I'm a teacher. And, you know, whenever I teach a science lesson and give some anecdotes about a religious person that has made some significant scientific discoveries, so Isaac Newton would be an obvious one, Georges Lemaitre, who was kind of the father of the modern Big Bang Theory, but also a Catholic priest, is another one. There will always be kids who show visible signs of offense, literally offense, because what I've said is blasphemy, because they have actually been brought up to believe that religion and its adherents must necessarily oppose science. And what I've said basically counteracts that. But still, you know, one might ask, why can't Muslims lighten up, you know, just as Christians have, right? You know, I could wear a t-shirt saying Jesus was gay in just about anywhere in Europe, well, just about anywhere in Western Europe if I wanted to, and nothing would happen. Right. So it's the thing. Our Christian friends have effectively committed suicide and handed liberals the shovel to bury them. We should learn from, and this is, and I say this with no disrespect to Christians. In fact, I hold, in a lot of ways, I hold Christians living in secular places like the UK who continue to believe in God in incredibly high regard, actually, because of the amount of, well, just as part of the culture, just the amount of abuse and so forth that holding on to their faith actually will give them. But we should learn from their example, and we should also make links with the few Christians who still take their faith seriously in the West, because when it comes to these modern issues, we are on the same side. Also, the thing is, Muslims' so-called sensitivity, it isn't just random with no rhyme or reason. It is in response to wanton, gratuitous, and vulgar insults, and what's more, the double standards that often accompany them. So in France, for example, even at a government level, the country promotes attacking the Prophet upon whom be peace, yet criminalizes defaming the French flag. You know, perhaps if the government was, you know, just complete libertarians and you could just insult anything with no consequence. I'm not saying Muslims still wouldn't get offended, but at least there would be some consistency there. But in fact, there are actually plenty of comedic portrayals of Muslims, which Muslims have not really taken offense to, because the intention to gratuitously insult or hold in contempt of the faith itself was not really there. So one example I'll give, a popular film, a kind of dark comedy called Four Lions. A funny little film if you haven't seen it, but it's about Muslim terrorists. The protagonists are all Muslim terrorists who do and say really stupid stuff all the time. Yet, and it is pretty hilarious. But that was generally taken pretty well by Muslims. I would actually say it was more popular than Muslims than non-Muslims. It was generally taken pretty well because yes, the main characters were Muslims who were terrorists and idiots, but it wasn't attacking the faith itself, nor gratuitously insulting it. Okay, the next question. This is an interesting question, actually. Why do you defend Christian history, particularly medieval history? So this is quite true, because quite often on various videos, I've said things that appear to be very much kind of defending Christian history in the past, in response to things that secular liberals in general have said. So, why have I done this, basically? Well, I'd first and foremost say that, rather than saying I defend Christian history per se, I'm really just defending the truth, right? And look, here's another example for you. World War II, right? You've probably been told a load of stuff about World War II, like the Russians greatly outnumbered the Germans, and they only won because the Russian winter froze half the Germans to death. And the Russians were also fanatics who gunned down loads of their own men and raped like half the women of Germany afterwards. Now, none of that is true, right? Those are basically tropes that actually originated from German officers for the most part. Now, have I defended the Soviet Union? Right? Have I defended the Soviet Union by saying that none of this stuff was true? Well, no. It's not a matter of defending, right? It's telling the truth. And if we don't, then someone will debunk us and replace it with their own truth. So this is why you also have very kind of right-wing reactionary models of history, which will say things that the Crusades were defensive wars, or that colonialism, benefited the world, Britain gave to the world, etc. I'm against those narratives as well. But I feel that Muslims sometimes think that they have to believe that European history, especially medieval history, was particularly backward, brutal, and stupid, to show that how at one period of time Islam was very much the light of the world. But the thing is, you can still believe that latter part, right? Medieval Islam was certainly much more tolerant to minorities, such as Jews, for example, and scientific progress, especially in the early Middle Ages, really flourished in the Islamic world much more than the West. But, Christians are still people of revelation. And, most medieval Christians, except maybe those of Spain, but most medieval Christians were, for most intensive purposes, not reached as far as Islam was concerned. Yes, they would have had some awareness that the Turk or the Saracen had their own religion, which then was often just assumed to be a kind of heretical offshoot of Christianity. But the common person wouldn't have known that much more. And the problem is, when we join liberals in their factually inaccurate tropes, I guess, we're actually just helping them spread the narrative that religion is a malign and anti-intellectual force, even if at that particular moment in time, they are not talking about our religion. So it's much better to say, I think, that Christianity did provide improvements to pre-Christian Europe. You did have proto-concepts of human rights, right? I mean, not very different to the kind of human rights that we would recognize today, but you did have the emergence of very kind of basic concepts of human rights. We had the development of hospitals, which are originally places of hospitality for wayfarers who would not be taken in by other people because they had diseases and so forth. And then that's how they became adapted to also looking after diseases. Hence, hospital now means a place of curing disease. Originally, it just meant a place where hospitality is given. Then you also have concepts from Christianity such as God's laws of nature, which, and this really kind of triggers your average kind of secularist, which really did contribute to scientific development in Europe, as well as, of course, technology transfer and the transfer of ideas from the Muslim world. That is absolutely true as well. So I'm not denying that, Christian history is, to put it mildly, very, very flawed, and certainly not denying that it was intolerant by modern standards or by the standards of the Muslim world at the same time. But I just think that we just need to get our facts straight, and we just need to tell the truth about things. Basically, when it comes to history, anything which we do not specifically know a lot about, whatever we say is going to be stupid, and we don't want to sound stupid. So, all right, the next question asks, why do American Muslims generally seem to be less committed to the faith than European ones, and certainly compared to Muslims living in the United Kingdom? So, of course, I'm not a sociologist. I can only give my take, though I should say something that I really recommend are the books and lectures, for that matter, by Dr. Jeffrey Lang, who shed some incredibly, really, really great insights on the subject of Muslims growing up in America. So anyway, some reasons. Well, it seems firstly, it seems incontestable that American Muslims generally do seem to be less committed than European, certainly British Muslims. So what could be some of the reasons for this? So one reason which I've encountered is the Iranian diaspora. So a lot of Iranians, more so than live in the UK, a lot of Iranians live in the United Kingdom, and they basically have quite a good, don't think good is the right word, they basically have quite a track record for leaving the faith and becoming irreligious relative to other Muslim communities. In fact, Iran itself actually has quite a secular populace, according to many surveys, and the Iranian diaspora around the world even more so. Some reasons for that include things like pressure from the government, which has actually repelled people from the religion, then other kind of competing ideologies like Iranian nationalism and communism, for example. But there is more to it, I think, because I don't know I haven't ever really known any Iranian Americans, but I have known quite a few Muslim Americans, and certainly most of them seem to be very woke, very liberal. They were all kind of bigging up Hillary Clinton. They thought Obama was a great guy, our savior Barack Obama, the pioneer of predator drone strikes. He was a great guy. He did a really good job. They're pretty proud to be American as well. Now, the American establishment is actually pretty secular. Yes, the majority of people still identify as Christians, but the establishment is pretty secular. And by this, I mean the corporate world, I mean the media, I mean films, and the influences that a young second-generation immigrant will grow up with. These are rather secular influences. This is why you rarely have children of Muslim immigrants converting to Christianity in America, but you certainly do have many of them losing their faith altogether. So, of course, in Europe, the establishment is secular too. In fact, in Europe, the populace, in Northern Europe anyway, the populace is even more secular. But I think the American way of life is a little bit more infectious, especially for middle or upper middle class people, as many Muslim Americans are. And just think about it, right? Imagine you are a Muslim American, or you're the child of Muslim immigrant parents. Your family is alone in a middle class suburb, in a lovely house where you've got plenty of commodities. You're probably in one of the much more progressive parts of the US. Your immigrant parents certainly haven't bothered to educate you with any form of religion which is particularly meaningful. Certainly no form of religion that would be particularly meaningful in the context of the community that you now live. But they certainly push you to do well at school. That's pretty common, and college as well. And there is pressure to be popular and join in. Your friends are probably at best Christians in name only, or Jews in name only. And in fact, they probably sneer and look down on the so-called rednecks living in the Bible Belt. And you probably do too, even though these people would actually have a lot more in common with a practicing Muslim in terms of how they live their lives than most of your liberal American friends do. There probably isn't even a mosque, and even if it was, it's probably far away, and it's unlikely that the sermons would consist of much that you could relate to anyway. And besides, who needs religion when there are so many more immediate and secular sources of fun and comfort? So that is a picture of many, probably most young Muslims growing up in America. But by contrast, in Europe, at least in the United Kingdom where I live, there is a higher density of Muslims and there is more community. Yes, community with many, many flaws, but community and brotherhood and belonging nonetheless. I'm sure there are many more reasons why Americans are more likely to drift away from the faith. Plus, of course, human autonomy and decision making. But I guess those are the ones that immediately come to mind anyway.